Having been in the trenches investigating this corruption scandal for 2 years, I mean, my capacity for shock is probably somewhat less than the average person.
Nick McKenzie has been digging into allegations of corruption in the CFMEU construction union since 2024. It's a powerful union meant to protect workers. Instead, it's been accused of running a racket, with bikie gangs and criminals ripping billions of dollars out of government-funded projects. Now a report has laid bare the scale of it all.
We've looked at a bikie gang infiltrating a government job over here. We've looked at Italian organised crime infiltrating a government project over there. But to see it all in one place, it was a tremendous dumping of shocking allegations, shocking conclusions, all leading in one direction, which is why the hell was this allowed to go on at such scale, and why has no one in the political class been held to account?
The report's author, barrister Geoffery Watson, not only tore the CFMEU to shreds, but also claimed the Victorian government knew about the problems and did nothing about it.
So if somebody had stomped on it earlier, the problem would have been fixed earlier. Now, who had that responsibility? Bearing in mind these were government projects, bearing in mind these were taxpayers' dollars being spent.
But that section of Watson's report that questioned the Victorian Labor government was deleted before the report was published.
You wouldn't believe this by looking at me, but I am a very bad-tempered, petulant person, and I can erupt at a moment's notice, and I was really actually quite angry.
So, is this a cover-up? I'm Nicole Johnston, and you're listening to 7am. Today, Nine Newspapers investigative reporter Nick McKenzie on contracts, kickbacks and building site strippers. How did the rot take root in the construction industry? It's Tuesday, February 17. Nick, it's about 2 years ago since you first broke the story of what you called an unholy alliance between gangland figures and the CFMEU. You know, bikies, gangsters, infiltrating unions and given powerful positions, often on those government-funded projects. Now we've found out that there's even more going on. What do we know?
Well, it's like a bad sort of crazy Hollywood script, the latest set of allegations in terms of the depth of criminal infiltration, of the involvement of bikies, of bribery, of corruption, drug trafficking on government sites, women allegedly being forced to perform sex acts to get work, or stripping in site sheds. But at the core of all of this, and perhaps most seriously, is this conclusion from an anti-corruption expert that the Victorian Labor government not only had a duty to know this was going on their government projects, but did know and did nothing about it. So it turned a blind eye effectively. And the cost of this failure to combat this crime and corruption, according to this anti-corruption expert, Geoffery Watson SC, is a stunning $15 billion in Victorian taxpayer and federal taxpayer money.
So all of this came out at a Queensland inquiry into CFMEU corruption, where Geoffery Watson testified. Can you tell us a bit more about what he said?
Well, Geoffery Watson SC is a very well-known corruption buster. He's best known previously for his work with the ICAC in New South Wales, bringing down both Labor and Liberal politicians and political figures. And Watson's job is really, what is the scale, what is the scope of the corruption of the CFMEU? What's happened, what's gone wrong? He testified to reveal for the first time the findings of this big 18-month inquiry into what went wrong in Victoria.
How bad did things get in Victoria?
Oh my God, it's out of control.
And so that happened last week, and it was absolutely stunning because what Watson found is breathtaking. I've never read a corruption report quite so jaw-dropping as Watson's report. Gone is all the sort of polite language. It's just a catalogue of shocking bikie corruption, union corruption, corporate corruption.
A man who had killed somebody was released from jail and almost immediately appointed a health and safety representative of the Victorian branch of the CFMEU.
He was extremely forthright on the stand, laying out who the baddies are, calling out gangland figures such as Mick Gatto, very infamous gangland figure, and really, I think, pointedly and importantly describing how parts of his report had been changed to remove politically sensitive material, something that he said he was very angry about, and that's content that reflected poorly, mostly on the Victorian Labor government.
Who took them out and why?
They were removed by the CFMEU administrator, Mark Irving, KC. Now, he's a senior barrister. He was appointed by the Albanese government when our allegations first hit the press back in 2024. Irving's job is to take over the union, to get rid of the old ruling part of the union, to sack a bunch of officials for poor performance, for corruption, etc. And he's done that. But in this case, and keeping in mind he's a Labor Party appointee, he stripped these two critical parts of the report that were most damaging to Labor. Irving says he removed those parts of the report because he felt they were ill-founded. There wasn't a proper basis for which Geoffery Watson should estimate that $15 billion of taxpayer money was wasted or ended up in the pockets of Bikie gangs.
Sure, it's speculative. It's speculative to say the sun will come up tomorrow. When you read the simple points which I had made in the original version of the report, I would have thought the primary criticism of it would have been that it was a statement of the bleeding obvious.
The head of the Fair Work Commission, Murray Furlong, as a public servant, has backed that figure most recently.
That figure is consistent with what I've heard from officials from the Victorian government.
And this is where it gets really serious, I think, not just for Irving, but for Labor, federally and state. What we're seeing is this scandal has gone so far. We know that corrupt union officials have been operating and they've been turfed out. We know gangland figures are deeply involved. They've been exposed. But not a single public servant and not a single politician has been meaningfully held to account for their role overseeing projects where all this bad behaviour took place at the expense of the taxpayer. And that's the big missing part here. And that's what I think the removal of these parts of this report really underscores, all the accountability that we're yet to see in this rolling and still very big scandal.
So, Nick, would you go as far to say that this is a cover-up? And is there any doubt in your mind that the Victorian government knew organised crime had infiltrated government projects and then didn't act?
Well, there's two choices, isn't there? The government was either so incompetent it didn't know Bikie bosses were working on its projects, or it knew and turned a blind eye. They're the two choices. Now think about this. If your listeners are building a house and one day one of the subcontractors doing the tiling is replaced by a Bikie who rocks up and charges double the amount, you're likely to be making some pretty serious inquiries about why that's going on. It's the same thing that's happening on state government projects, except at a vastly greater scale. So how could the government not know about that? It had a duty to know about that. Taxpayer money. It's responsible for making sure organised crime doesn't take hold. There is a huge amount of evidence that shows the government, to some extent at least, did know this was going on. We know there's documents internally which raise allegations of blackmail, extortion, and now it's saying it didn't know. The Premier of Victoria, Jacinta Allen, is saying, I didn't know until it hit the media. That is quite clearly baloney. So certainly we deserve to know how much the government knew. We deserve to know the extent of that government incompetence and failure to act on organised crime. And while we don't know, there's a cover-up in place, and that cover-up remains in place as I speak here right now.
Coming up, how far has the rot spread outside Victoria? So, Nick, what has the Victorian government said about the allegations so far, or have they said anything?
Whenever we reveal more of this corruption and crime, we hear the same thing, or terrible. We don't like corruption and crime, says the Victorian Premier and the government. It's appalling. It should be referred to the authorities. And they said that again last week in response to this latest eruption.
When allegations were raised with me, they were referred to the relevant authority for their investigation. I have said that on previous occasions. When the media reports around the widespread nature of this rotten culture became public in the middle of 2024, we acted immediately.
It just handballs this shit sandwich to the Victorian police and to other authorities and says, well, you make of it what you will. That's never going to get to the bottom of this. The Victorian police do a fine job, but like every state police force around this country, they're utterly stretched. And it's not the job of the Victorian Police to ask the question or to answer it. What did politicians know about corruption? Did they enable it by failing to act on it? What did the bureaucrats know about corruption? How did this corruption work? These are questions that fall well outside the duties of the Victoria Police Force. Their question is normally left for some proper inquiry, a commission of inquiry, a royal commission. So while there is a strong comment from Victorian Labor government, it's actually very, very weak in substance. And let's not forget this, the minister responsible for many of these projects while they were hosting this corruption and crime was none other than the Premier, Jacinta Allen. She was the Transport and Infrastructure Minister in charge of these major government projects while the infiltration of organised crime, of bikies, of corrupt unionists occurred. It happened under her watch. And so that system of Westminster accountability, the buck should stop at the top. And that might be the reason why we're not having a proper system of accountability in place to ask those critical questions. Who in government knew what and when, and why didn't they act?
A lot of the focus has been on what's been going on in Victoria's CFMEU. But Queensland, as we know, is looking into the union there as well. It's had its own commission of inquiry. So how widespread do you think corruption is across the construction industry?
It's vastly widespread. We've seen very significant cases of organised crime infiltration and corrupt union operations in New South Wales, to a lesser extent Queensland, and certainly to a massive extent in Victoria. There's issues in WA, there's issues in South Australia. This has been a festering problem in Australia for decades. But there is some silver lining. The Victorian Police, the police in Victoria, are doing a good job finally having a crack at some of these criminal elements. But the same thing is not happening in New South Wales and Queensland and elsewhere. Why is it such a problem? Well, we've had a decades-long issue of organised crime, of union corruption on construction sites. It must be said that this can't happen without corrupt corporates. This is as much a union problem as it is a company problem. And it's a problem that we've seen overseas, most famously in the United States. The FBI had mega task forces set up to crack down on the unions, working with the mafia in New York and other places to corrupt the construction industry there. So we're in the grip of it in Australia. It's starting to have some real political consequence now. And maybe now this is the moment for change. Will we have a proper clean-up of the sector, this vital sector in Australia? Or will in 5 years, will we be reading the very same headlines that we've been reading most recently?
Nick, since you started investigating this a couple of years ago, there have been some attempts to clean up the industry. But from what you're saying, it sounds like nothing's really changed.
I mean, there has been some significant change of late, that must be said. So, the bosses of the CFMEU that oversaw this corrupt mess, this infiltration of organised crime into government projects, they've been turfed out. They've left. John Sector's gone. His executive is gone. In New South Wales, Darren Greenfield, the former boss of the CFMEU, literally is sitting in jail right now for taking bribes. So we've had some corrupt elements removed. But what we've not had is a proper in-depth clean-up of the sort that will lead to sustainable long-term change. Companies that have been part of this racket, they've faced zero accountability. Largely, police aren't doing enough. There is some good work by the federal police. There's some great work by the Victorian police. But around the country, the police, it's like squeezing water with your hand. You just displace it. There's not enough police action. There's not enough regulatory action. There's not enough system-wide clean-up. Why does this matter? I mean, this is money that me and you are spending as taxpayers on these government projects. So our money's being wasted. It could be going into health, education, etc. It's not. It's going to the pockets of bikies. We want a fair and level playing field for businesses, for workers in construction. Everybody listening to this will know somebody in one way or another who works in the construction industry. It's a massive employer in this country, from the lowly workers holding traffic signs to subcontractors to big building companies to union officials. It's a vast part of our economy and we deserve it to be clean. It shouldn't be infiltrated by organised crime. But perhaps the biggest reason is when we have a corrupt union, it infects government. It leads for bad political outcomes. It leads for people in Parliament who should not be in Parliament. The CFMEU has sponsored people into our state and federal parliaments for many years. Should they be there? So we as voters, we as citizens deserve better and we deserve a proper clean out, and that's why it's so important.
Nick, thanks for speaking with us.
My pleasure.
Also in the news, Naveed Akram, the man accused of taking part in the Bondi terror attack, has appeared at a Sydney court via video link. The 24-year-old faces 59 charges, including 15 counts of murder and one of committing a terrorist attack over the shooting in December. Akram's father was shot dead by police at the scene of the attack, which took place during a Jewish Hanukkah by the Sea event. Akram's lawyer says it's too early to say how his client will plead. And supermarket giant Coles has been accused of a planned campaign to mislead customers over price discounts in a case now before the federal court. The consumer watchdog, the ACCC, is suing the supermarket, claiming it ripped off customers by hiking prices for a short period of time before dropping them for their down promotion. Coles argues the price rises were justified, citing high inflation and supplier demands. I'm Nicole Johnston. This is 7am. Catch you tomorrow.